right. Hello. So I have something to tell y'all. So, take it back 3 years ago. I had the honor of meeting a wonderful, wonderful person, coincidentally, at this very same event. She had long hair, and she was from the Valley, like me, one of my first connections here at LFC. Then, 3 years passed in the blink of an eye, from walking back from LFC to eating at Kin's to laughing out loud at an engineering talent show we didn't belong at, to life group, to advice giving, and to jumping up and down in celebration in the bathroom hallway. I can say I have learned so much from her. I look up to and am inspired by her wisdom, strength, and courage, and I'm honored to be her friend. This amazing person is Karina, and you are very lucky because today she stands before you about to share her testimony, and I want to pray over her. Heavenly Father, I thank you for allowing us to be here in support of Karina, and thank you for blessing us with being able to hear from her. But tonight, I want to ask that you surround her with hope and love. I hope that you give her all the strength and the courage to be vulnerable and open and to share her testimony with us. Te encomiendo su corazón, su mente y su espíritu. In God's name we pray. Amen.
You're going to have to excuse me while I go grab my iPad. Thank you, Carrie. God is known to have many names. He is known as God the healer, God the provider. In Exodus, the Lord is called a man of war, and that is who he is to me because of how much he has fought for me. And today I will be sharing that attribute of God. That's my favorite way to think about God, as someone who fights for me. And he delivered me from being a person confined by difficult circumstances. My name is Karina. I am the only and oldest daughter of a Mexican family. My dad is a minister. He traveled all around Mexico, wherever churches invited him to go preach, and my mother was a children's pastor at her church. And then when I turned 3, we moved to the United States. If you're from a border town, you know that it's very common for the men to go work in the oil fields, and that's how they send money back to their families. And so my dad was not very present after we got here, and I would see him once every couple of months. What I remember most about my childhood is my mom. She didn't have the best upbringing, and it shaped a lot of who she was, her mentality, and her expectations. To her family, to my dad, and to the church, she was kind and she was helpful. But when we were alone, and my dad was across the country, she was angry, and she was lonely, and she was tired. She was very difficult to grow up with, and one of my earliest memories, I remember I asked her if she could do my makeup the way that she did hers. And usually when a little girl expresses interest in makeup or routines like the mother, it's this nice mother-daughter bonding moment, and you get to play dress up and play with makeup. Instead, she hit me, and she felt unconscious and in a fit of rage and embarrassment. I was confused and I was hurt, and I spent the rest of that evening alone in the dark until I fell asleep. All I wanted was to spend time with her. And I didn't realize at the time that she was dealing with her own pretty heavy stuff. She didn't know how to respond to those negative feelings other than expelling them physically. And the rest of our relationship was not much different. She would grab my hair and drag me into the floor to look at the dust I missed when I swept. She would discipline me with a clothing iron's cable, and she wouldn't let me eat if I had been bad that day. She would berate and insult me. But honestly, now it's kind of hard to get offended because nothing compares. For as long as I can remember, I unwillingly helped her unload her frustrations as the nearest target. And so I grew up in a very cold, quiet home. We were poor for most of my life, and I didn't have cable or extracurriculars, and all I had to do was homework and read all the books in the library. And out of that grew the discipline that I have today. That was one of the areas that my mom did not fail me in. She understood the importance of the opportunities that existed here, and she pushed and instilled in me the pursuit of knowledge and education. And I remember she would haggle with the ladies at the flea market to buy me those math flashcards with numbers and animals and fruits on them. She taught me never to trust anyone, never to beg anyone, to always be cold and composed, and that it was the only way to get through life without getting hurt. I remember she taught me that apologizing was for the weak and it didn't fix anything. And I don't remember what I had done wrong this particular time, but I apologized. And she grabbed me by the arm and she screamed at me not to apologize because it didn't change anything. And you'd think that I'd be afraid or sad, but at this point, I was proud that we had had a breakthrough because she had taught me a life lesson. And the things that I would read about in books or heard my friends talk about had finally happened to me. And I held on to that advice for longer than I'm willing to admit. Obviously, now I know that it's really bad advice. But it was yet another glimpse into the dark and twisted world that she understood at that moment in her life. And so anyway, I became cold and guarded and angry, and I quickly grew to resent her. I hated calling her mom. I didn't feel like she was doing her job as a mother, and for a long time I didn't see her as a mom at all. Just someone I was stuck with and had to get away from. My friends in school became people that I just latched onto, and I didn't care that I always came second as long as I had someone. And well, we all have our middle school and high school traumas. Teenagers and puberty and mood swings, we all know how bad that can get. And I think that period of my life just magnified what was already inside of me. I felt uncultured because I was poor. I felt like the ugly friend everywhere I went. I was angry and I was jealous and I was unhappy and I was unfulfilled. And outside of that, all I had was to be the best at everything. I had the best grades. I was a leader in every club. I had the highest rank. All whilst hating every ounce of who I was, looking for some sort of validation. But none of it was ever enough to get my own mom to love me. Now my dad is a good man. He's intelligent, and his faith is stronger than anyone's I've ever met. He's strong, and he's playful, and he's full of love, and he's full of hope, and I hated that he was never home. Anyway, whenever he was home, both he and my mom became as involved in the church as they used to be, and that meant that I had to be too. I participated in everything. I wrote poetry, and I held plays and organized events for every major holiday in the church, and I did all of these things because I was expected to, not because I wanted to. And this is how I was introduced to God and to Christianity. Now, high school was rough, I'm not gonna lie. It was bad. And I cried a lot, and I felt very alone. I couldn't go to my family, and I had too much pride to ask my friends for help. And it got to the point where I was so numb. I had no love. I hated coming home at the end of the day, and I hated being at school. And I ended up in a place where I believed the world would be better if I wasn't in it. And it wasn't this dramatic, like, I want to kill myself. It wasn't some overwhelming feeling of self-destruction. It was quiet, and it was calm, and it was simple. I felt abused by the one person called to nurture and protect me. I would be one less kid for my dad to work so hard for, and I would be less competition for everybody at school. And it was just this understanding of not making a difference in the world, and that if I were to slowly disappear, no one would even notice. It was this idea that came to me ever so gently, and the idea grew roots in my heart. I experimented with self-harm until finally it just clicked that I shouldn't be here. But I remember being smart enough to understand that it was not healthy, and that I had to do something if I wanted anything to change. And so I don't know how I got the guts to do this, but one night, when my dad was home, I called him into my room, and we sat at the edge of my bed, and I told him, Dad, I felt this way for a long time, and I just don't want to be here. And we had just moved into a new house. And he thought I was talking about the house, and he asked me, well, where do you want to go? And I remember being so calm when I had to correct him and be like, no, Dad, that's not what I mean. Everyone would be better off if I wasn't here. You would be better off if I wasn't here. And I think my dad didn't say anything. We were quiet for a long time until he said, can I pray for you? And I can't even begin to explain the rage that I felt, because his daughter had just told him she wanted to kill herself, and his response was prayer. And I was not some person from church. I was his daughter, and I deserved more care. I deserve more than that. And so I just said, I guess. And I don't remember what he said in that prayer, but I know that I didn't join him. And then he just walked out of my room without another word. And once again, I found myself alone in a dark, empty room until I fell asleep. And then life went on, and seemingly nothing changed. When someone is in a place where they want to take their own life, you can't tell them that the answer is someone that you can't see, someone that you can't hear, and someone that you can't feel. You just can't, because it doesn't work. I wanted nothing to do with God. I felt so alone that I didn't hear him, and I didn't see him, and I did not want to. I had thousands of unanswered prayers and circumstances that implied that even a higher being didn't care about me. And I think what breaks my heart the most about this story is that I will never know how much this hurt my dad. We never talked about it. I'll never know how much he cried. I'll never know how sad he was, even though he didn't show it. And he was already giving me his everything. It wasn't his fault that he wasn't home. And I'll never know what that prayer did for me. I'll never know if that's what God responded to. I don't know if that's what moved God to heal something in me. I'll never know if that prayer changed anything. It didn't feel grandiose, and it didn't feel life-changing. But I think that that prayer was one of the most powerful cries to God on my behalf in my entire life. I would get into fights, and I would scream, and I would curse, and if anger was a person, it was me. But at the end of the day, that anger was just sadness and loneliness. My family would even introduce me to other people as bitter, or amargada in Spanish. I didn't find joy in anything. At family parties, my cousins, they're all girls, they would scream and they would squeal with excitement at everything, and they loved to dress up and hang out. And when I was around them, I would go after that joy, because I hated seeing people find joy in little things. And I would roll my eyes and I would tell them to shut up. And even I went as far as telling them they were ugly, because I just so badly didn't want them to have something that I didn't have. And I remember my aunts would pull me to the side and tell me, "Don't let your mom get to you. We know that she can be tough, but you can break the cycle and you can be different." And I wanted to believe that. I really did, but I didn't have it in me. And I blamed her for everything, for who I was. I had so much resentment in my heart. This whole period of my life was just me on cruise control. I'd wake up and do homework and then go to practice and then go to school and then go to meetings after and go to practice again, go home and do housework and then do my homework and go to sleep and repeat. Until it got so bad that I was hardly at home, and it was the first time that my mom reached out to me and she said, "I don't want to lose you." But I was so in my head that I missed it. And I didn't take that opportunity. And so finally, on my 18th birthday, she came into my room that morning and she gave me my first hug. The first time I could ever remember she had ever hugged me. Because she touched me, and it didn't hurt. To this day, I don't really like being touched, especially by strangers. And I cried so much because I'd finally felt a loving touch. But still, it didn't fix anything. I had been the way that I was for far too long, and nothing changed. But I have found love. When I came to college, my Sundays were empty because I no longer had to go to church, but I was used to routines, and I looked to get that routine back. See, I knew about God, and the only reason I kept him around, the only reason I didn't dismiss the idea completely, was because at the end of the day, it's not a bad idea. You don't really have a lot to lose by not murdering, not lying, and not stealing. I could recognize that there was value in the teachings from the Bible, and that it was the only guide, really, that I had to a life, living a life that I wanted, living a life so completely different to the one that I had. And so I thought, I have nothing else to do, and I looked for a church, and I found one. And this is when I started meeting people my age who loved God and knew God, and they had this source of peace and love and protection that was unheard of for me, and I wanted it. They had a whole new kind of love that I hadn't experienced yet, and the way that they talked about God and Jesus, I was so curious about knowing that God. I knew that I knew about him, but it was different than the way that these kids did. And then I started going to church and reading my Bible because I wanted to. And through the resources of my newfound community, I started to learn new things. And I started noticing that I began to break away from being the person that I was. I started finding that peace, that love that I had been searching for so long. And I accepted that this was my life and that it was the only one I was going to have. And that my past didn't need me anymore, but my future did. And I found promises from the creator of the universe that he would never leave me and that he had a plan for me. And I found so much peace in that I felt that I could finally rest. And I decided to accept these as truths and accept God as my Savior. And only in Him did I find freedom. Now, everybody knows that your relationship with your parents improves when you move away, and this was true for me as well, in ways that I couldn't imagine. I remember when I first started noticing, my youngest brother would ask me, "Why is Mom so mean to you?" Because it started with him. She would tell him she loved him, and she would play with him, and tickle him, and talk to him. And then I moved away to college, and I can't pinpoint exactly the moment that I realized that she was a completely different person. If you were to tell the old Karina that there would be a day when her and her mom would be crying of laughter together at a meme, she would not believe you. I buy her flowers now when I go home, and we take naps together, and I FaceTime her all the time. And God is healing me from all of the damage that came from that old relationship. And I don't know how it happened or what it was for her that did it. But God answered the one prayer that I had prayed consistently for 18 years, since I first learned what prayer was. But she changed so completely, and I saw God work within her and change her too. And we're not completely perfect. We still struggle to tell each other we love each other. But now that love is there, when it didn't feel like it was before. If someone were to ask me how I know that God is real, the answer would simply be that only God could make a change so transformative like the one that I saw in her. I know that God is real. And it's okay if you don't know for sure that God is real. Now I'm here, and I'm still nowhere near perfect, and there's still a lot of things that I struggle with, and there's a lot of people that I haven't forgiven. But now I have confidence. Now I have someone who fights for me, someone to give me strength when I have none, and someone to forgive me when I can't forgive myself for the things that I've said and the things that I've done. Even when I have no one, I have someone. And I will never find myself abandoned in a dark, empty room ever again. Now, there are things that have happened to me outside of this main journey that I've taken you on that have shaped a really big part of who I am and what I stand for. I've experienced the horrors of being a woman in a man's world, and I've experienced recreating an abusive situation at home in my own relationships. And we've had to endure near-death experiences within the family. And I decided that it wouldn't do me any good to bring all of those things back up. Because at the end of the day, all there really is to say is that God was there. In those moments of darkness when I was alone and I had no one to tell and no one to protect me and no arms to hold me, God was there. And this doesn't mean that I'm over these things or that they hurt any less or even that I've forgiven. But there's no way that I did all of that on my own. There's no way. And now I know that throughout all of this, my pastors prayed for me. My aunt and my uncles prayed for me. And I think that all of these people around me carried me for the first 18 years of my life. God used other people in my life to believe for me and to pray for me and to have faith for me. And although those were the toughest and loneliest years of my life, I was not alone, even though I didn't feel it then. When God brings you out of situations like these, it's really hard to know that He's there with you until after the fact. And I know that there might be some of you who are still in those valleys. And I just want you to know that God is moving, even when you can't see Him or hear Him, or even want anything to do with Him. If you have the smallest amount of faith, or if you don't but you wish you did, and you want so badly for everything that I've said to be true, that is enough for God. He will work with that, and you will see transformation. And when I told y'all the story about my dad, I definitely didn't feel God in that moment. And I wanted nothing to do with Him. And let's even say that God wasn't with me then. I had closed every other door to Him. But I left a tiny little crack open for my dad, not for God. For the one man that I felt deserved to know. But God was there in that room that night with me at my lowest point, because He came in with my dad. And He found a way to fight for me and to break down every door that I had put up. And if I try to explain that to the Karina that I was then in that moment, I know that she wouldn't believe me. But it's okay, because she didn't have to. Someone else believed for her. And God still worked with that. And I'm not saying that you never have to do anything and God will fix everything. What I'm saying is that you are not hopeless, and you are not too far for Him to reach. If you actively look for God, it will make a difference. I know that it would have if I had looked for God earlier. And now I'm stronger in my faith, and I've bettered my character and my relationship with God. And now I get to be that person for those of you who are still there. I will believe and I will pray when you feel like you can't, because now I know that it works, and now I know that it's real. And I want everyone to be able to experience the love and that peace that comes with crying out to God, God, I need you, and knowing that He will come. And it's really hard to believe, I know, until you have it. And if any part of you wants it, I urge you to leave that door open for God. Jesus died and He carried all of our burdens so that we don't have to. And He was on this earth and He experienced rejection and abuse and loss the way that we did. And He will pray on our behalf to see change. And if you are still there, you will be stronger one day, and you will have what it takes to better yourself and to better your situation. And if you think you have no one, if you feel alone and you feel invisible, the hardest thing you will have to do is find one person, because that's all it takes. There are people all around you who will pray for you and believe for you and help you carry yourself when you are not strong enough to do it on your own. I see God the most when I look back at what I've been through. And in the end, it all amounted to who I am today. And now I'm graduating in May, and a new story will be written. I'm moving away to a city where God is far from people's minds, and now I have to take another step in my faith to go there and bring him with me. And I know that I came on a little strong this whole evening, but I'm still scared because I don't know what it's going to take, and I don't know if I'm strong enough. All I know is that God promised me that he would never leave me, and he has proved that to me in a very big way, and I have that to hold on to. And now you all know me more vulnerably than almost anyone in my life. And all of you and LFC hold such a dear place in my heart. And I have no doubt that God is doing really big things in all of you. I want to thank you all for being here. And I trust that God has led each and every one of you here, if not to be the person who leaves the door open, then to be the one that comes through it for someone else. Just taking the step to be here and listen shows me that you already have that door open to some extent, and that is enough. Romans 8:28 says, all things work together for good. Whatever you have gone through, don't give up, because God has a plan for you. And even if you don't understand why you went through what you did, God will be glorified in your story. And so I leave with that. Thank you for being here. And I pray that God is able to reach you in the same ways that he has reached me. Thank you all for being here.